The smell of roasted chicken filled the air as Jamal hurried between tables, his white apron brushing against his knees, the sound of clinking dishes echoing behind him. The dinner rush was at its peak in the downtown restaurant, and every customer seemed to be snapping their fingers for service. Outside, through the glass windows, the city was cold and gray, the kind of evening that made people hunch their shoulders and walk faster. But as Jamal carried a steaming plate of food to table 6, his eyes caught sight of someone sitting on the sidewalk across the street, a woman, frail and shivering, her hands wrapped around a metal bowl that looked empty except for a few crumbs. Her clothes were tattered, and her face pale. Yet what struck him most wasn't her poverty, but the way she occasionally placed her hand on her belly, a quiet, protective gesture that only a mother-to-be makes. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of good deeds, then please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel, because stories like this remind us that compassion still exists in this world. Jamal tried to look away, but something in his chest tightened. The restaurant buzzed with noise, yet his attention kept drifting back to that woman. He knew hunger too well. He'd grown up in a neighborhood where skipping meals wasn't rare, where his mother sometimes pretended she wasn't hungry just so her kids could eat. That memory haunted him now as he looked at the woman sitting helplessly in the cold. Minutes passed, and he found himself standing in front of the kitchen counter, holding a plate of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and vegetables. He didn't even think twice before he walked out the door, across the street, and knelt beside her. The smell of the food hit her first. She looked up, startled, her eyes wet and tired. Jamal smiled softly and offered her the plate. She hesitated, whispering something he could barely hear, maybe thank you, maybe a prayer, before taking it with trembling hands. She began eating slowly, almost reverently, as if each bite was a miracle. When Jamal returned inside, the manager was waiting. Mr. Collins, a man whose suit was as stiff as his heart, stood by the counter with folded arms. "Where's the meal for table 6?" he asked coldly. Jamal tried to explain, his words tumbling out. The woman was pregnant, starving, he couldn't just watch. But Collins didn't want to hear it. "We're not a charity," he said sharply. "You've just stolen company property." And just like that, Jamal was fired. No discussion, no warning, just a short walk to the back door, the sound of laughter and silverware fading behind him. He stood in the alley, stunned, his apron still on, the words, "You're done here," ringing in his ears. The days that followed were heavy. Jamal searched for work everywhere, diners, cafes, hotels, but no one wanted to hire someone fired for stealing food. He tried to stay positive, reminding himself he'd done the right thing. But bills piled up. His rent was due. Some nights, he went to bed hungry again, replaying that moment in his mind, the woman's grateful eyes, her shaking hands, the tiny life she was carrying. He told himself that maybe, just maybe, her and her baby had made it another day because of that one act. And even if no one else ever knew, that was enough. 5 days later, as Jamal sat outside his apartment building, a sound broke his thoughts, the soft purr of an engine. A sleek black luxury car pulled up to the curb, the kind that looked wildly out of place in his neighborhood. The tinted window rolled down, and a driver stepped out, dressed in a clean suit. "Mr. Jamal Carter?" he asked politely. Jamal nodded, unsure. "Someone would like to see you." The driver opened the door, and out stepped a woman. At first, Jamal didn't recognize her. She looked completely different, her hair washed and tied neatly, her clothes new, her skin glowing with warmth. But then she smiled, and he knew. It was her, the same woman from that cold sidewalk, though now she looked radiant, her baby bump visible beneath her dress. Tears filled her eyes as she approached him. "You don't know what you did for me," she said softly. "That night, I hadn't eaten in 2 days. I thought I'd lose my baby. But your kindness saved us both." Jamal stood speechless as she continued. She explained how, after eating, she'd been taken to a shelter by a passerby. A volunteer there helped her reconnect with her estranged father, a wealthy businessman who had been searching for her for months after she'd run away from a troubled relationship. Now, her life was back on track. And she hadn't stopped thinking about the man who had given her that plate of food when no one else would. She handed him an envelope. Inside was a letter, and a check. The amount made Jamal's hands tremble. It wasn't just a tip or a token of thanks, it was enough to change his life. "My father wanted to help you," she said. "He owns several restaurants downtown. He'd like to offer you a position, as manager." Jamal's knees nearly gave out. The tears he'd been holding back for days finally spilled. For a long moment, the two stood there in silence, the woman whose life he had touched with a single meal, and the man whose kindness had come back to him 100-fold. From that day on, Jamal worked at one of the finest restaurants in the city, not as a waiter, but as the person in charge of leading others with compassion. He made sure no food was ever wasted, that leftovers went to shelters, and that no hungry person was ever turned away from the back door. His story spread through the city like a quiet fire, reminding everyone that one small act of kindness can ripple farther than we ever imagine. Months later, Jamal sat in his office, a picture on his desk, a photo of him holding a tiny newborn baby in his arms, the same child whose life he had unknowingly saved that cold evening. He would often look at it when the world felt harsh, and whisper to himself, "It was all worth it." If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe, not just for us, but to spread the message that one act of compassion can change everything. And before you go, comment below, do you believe that kindness always finds its way back?